Nigeria Senate, that is Nigeria Senate, has proposed significantly toughening penalties for drug trafficking, making the death penalty the maximum sentence through a law amendment. The amendment, which is not yet law, replaces life imprisonment, which was previously the harshest punishment. Nigeria's Africa's most populous country of more than 200 million people has in recent years gone from being a transit point for illegal drugs to a full-blown producer, consumer, and distributor, while cannabis is cultivated locally. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and other narcotics are trafficked through the country alongside opioids to feed a growing addiction problem. The legislation stemmed from a report by the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters and Drugs and Narcotics, which Senator Mohammed Monguno presented during the plenary session.
Sentence to death. I so move.
Is my name. I represent Buenos Senatorial District. Your Excellency, I want to support completely the submission of the Chief Whip in the sense that it is time to call a spade a spade. If we want to eradicate drug trafficking in Nigeria, the only way to do that is to nip it from the board and to make it a capital offense.
And of course, we'll have reactions from Amnesty International regarding this as well, because death penalty has been one of the biggest debates also here in the country, whether that should not be part of our, legal systems as well, as far as punishment is concerned. Real reaction to that particular story?
So, unfortunately, I think the Senate have gone in the wrong direction.
I'll come to you. Yeah, I'll come to you.
I think the Senate of Nigeria have gone in the wrong direction. I think the idea of judicial homicide is rapidly becoming an outdated method of dealing with complex criminal matters. In many ways, the world is now split into increasingly more abolitionist countries that have abolished the death penalty and replaced it with custodial sentences, and retentionist countries. And Nigeria remains a retentionist country, but it is also one that has not executed anybody in several years. I think the thing that we probably need to understand is what's the background to this. The background to this is the increasing amount of organized crime, particularly around smuggling of drugs from the African continent and other parts of the world into Europe. And there's been a lot of work that has been done between the Nigerian authorities and Europol, the equivalent of Interpol for Europe, to try and clamp down on these cases. There were several arrests in December. So this is the backdrop. But what's most ironic about this is that the method the Senate is proposing is one that has been long abandoned by the Europeans themselves. Right? So most European nations do not have the death penalty as a crime. Nigeria, as I mentioned, is a retentionist country, but it is also one of maybe half of the continent that continues to have this on their statute books, but does not actually execute people. What we know from studies in Kenya, there have been two very important studies by the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights. The first study essentially established that up to 40% of Kenyans no longer believe that the death penalty is a humane rule of law approach to dealing with even issues of manslaughter and murder. The second study, which is more recent, basically proves that for most of the people on death row today, many of them committed those crimes knowing that there was a death penalty. The death penalty does not represent a deterrent to hardened criminals. Many of those criminals were essentially first-time offenders. They came from poor backgrounds. They had several families that they were supporting, not just their own, but several families, and they felt that they had no option to survive or to provide for their families, but to commit these crimes. So I think the point of this is Nigeria is heading in the wrong direction to expand the number of crimes from currently, I think it is manslaughter, murder, probably coup plotting, to also drug trafficking. Much of the drug trafficking that comes out of Nigeria is actually low-level mule, delivery. It's people who are carrying drugs rather than the financiers, the people who make the profits from the drugs. And I think that's the point that we need to say, is that simply taking Nigeria in the direction of Iran, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, where 80% of the world's death penalty cases are, is the wrong direction. In many ways, what we need to see is an equipping of the law enforcement agencies to be able to capture, detain, and convict drug smugglers, not to turn to methods that have been long abandoned by the countries that Nigeria is trying to please by introducing these.
Yeah, but what about here in the country? Because I think one of the key case that we've had is that of Joy and Jackie Maribe, and people have been saying now, since there was abolishing of death penalty in the country, then that should be, he has maybe a leeway that he can use with that particular judgment. I don't know what will be your input on this. Can that be applied retrospectively? No, it can't.
In the case of the Joy murder case, Amnesty was actually cited by the judge in terms of our work on femicide and gender-based violence, and we agreed with the conviction of Joy based on the evidence that was deposited in court, but we disagreed with the sentence. In our view, a sentence that is custodial, that is backed by correctional facilities, rehabilitation, is a much better way of dealing with criminals, and even criminals that target women or children. That's what we've seen in many parts of the world where we have done this analysis, and of course Amnesty's report on the death penalty is probably the most comprehensive study that's been done or is done every year. So I think for us, we would continue to say that judicial homicide is not the way that a modern state deals with crime. A modern state does not execute in the way that we used to say biblically, or even I think in the Quran you have this, an eye for an eye. That may have been appropriate back in the medieval times, in ancient times, but in systems where you have the understanding of redemption, of rehabilitation and transformative justice, many states have moved successfully away from this process to actually create other ways of dealing with this issue.
All right, and I know you'll be leaving momentarily. So I would just wanted maybe to also put this particular case of death penalty with what is happening with one of us who was meant to be facing the slummers as well, not the slummers, but actually being executed 2 days from today. But that, I think, with the intervention of the Foreign Affairs Office, that has been postponed until negotiations now between Kenya and Iran is it Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia.
With Saudi Arabia, at least they reach a consensus regarding it. I don't know what will be your input regarding that when you talk about the lex talionis, eye for an eye, when it comes even to Sharia law.
No, I think the case...
Have you followed that particular case? Yeah.
Yes. Generally. So the case is essentially a Kenyan was found guilty by a court of killing a Saudi national and was sentenced to death. And in the mitigation, the lawyers for the family indicated that pleaded against the case, and the courts basically reverted to the family of the Saudi, and an understanding was generated that if a certain amount of money could be deposited with the Saudi family, then he would be released. So that's the general case that's there, and sadly the mother of the Kenyan man is actually somebody who's very well known, Dorothy Munyaho, who is a veteran journalist, served this country.
Dorcas Kwehu. Yeah.
Very much, Kwehu, I knew her from a bit earlier.
Okay.
So she has been campaigning really to raise that money. I think we would just say as Amnesty International that the death penalty is cruel and inhumane punishment wherever it happens, whether it is in Saudi Arabia, whether it is in Kenya, whether it will be in Nigeria. It is not, first of all, a deterrent for serious criminals. We know that from the analysis done. Some countries that have abolished the death penalty have seen murder and homicide rates go down rather than go up. So there is this sense that if you remove the death penalty, somehow criminals will get even more violent. It's not the case.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. Right, Farah Malim and Rungu Houghton, thank you so much. I know you're supposed to be stepping out. You have a meeting at around this time. Thank you for your contribution. I hope to see you soon as well. Don't get off the radar, as you've always been doing as well. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I would want to say something before he leaves on that. On the issue of, I personally, I support the death penalty.
You support the death penalty?
Fully. Except the proviso is the one he has just mentioned. If in an altercation somebody gets punched, maybe you did not intend even to kill the person, but somehow, for whatever reason, that person dies, and the family is willing to take a compensation. And in most cases, when this is done with that kind of an innocence, where somebody did not plan and do the murder and wait for somebody and take time and days and then end the life of that person, invariably, always, that forgiveness comes. That forgiveness comes. And you're told, actually, it's good to forgive when somebody has killed a loved one. But in this case, I think it would be a good idea that even the country and everybody gets on this. We all contribute one way or the other to get him off the hook. But if somebody takes drugs there, and it says drugs trafficking, it's not consumption. It's not a small amount of like, a roll or 2 rolls or 10 rolls or whatever it is. But if you're going to go and make a decision to make millions of dollars out of destroying the lives of other people, you have no right living, in my opinion. If you plan somebody's murder and you murder somebody, you kill somebody through planning, without that accidental thing. That's why it's called manslaughter sometimes. It's called what,
premeditated murder or manslaughter.
Yeah. If it's not premeditated and it's a manslaughter, that's okay. I mean, the law takes that into consideration. But when you plan well in advance and wait for somebody and whatever it is, then of course you have ended somebody's life. You don't deserve to live. You do not deserve to live at all. So drugs, I would push for a death penalty, push for that also to be implemented in our own country here, because drug lords are going to become the presidents of this country. We've already people who have been, I was chairing a session of parliament when 6 members of parliament were mentioned in the parliament, and I gave it a long leeway, a serious leeway. And one of them, who even later rose up to be something bigger, I'm not at liberty to mention the name, took offense of it and fought me very hard when I was running for a Senate Speaker. And I lost 5 votes, and from the same party with me. I lost 5 votes from ODM, and I lost with 1 vote. It's nothing to do with anything. It's just that this guy was fighting drugs. And because I gave it a serious leeway, if you go and look at the Hansard, you will see it. And then I went ahead and I say, freeze their accounts. And they took offense of it, and I fought back. So we've seen drug people who made wealth through drugs become governors in this country. What are we going to wait? We've seen, I don't want to mention that, but we've seen people at the highest level consume these drugs. Are you going to wait until the country become a nation of zombies and this country is destroyed? There's a young man who got a scholarship in 2 Ivy League universities.
Can I release it, Houghton?
I just want him to listen to that. A young man from my own county who got into 2 Ivy League universities, was an engineering student in University of Nairobi, but was admitted into Stanford and Harvard. 100% scholarship. Brilliant, genius. But somehow, because of coming from, sometimes some of this very rural, conservative background, and then suddenly you go into the Wild West at the first degree, the boy got into drugs. And right now he's under medication. It's a matter of, I don't think if he's under medication back at home. It's a mind that was destroyed completely. And I'm told whoever it is, friends he met, introduced him into that and destroyed that mine. A genius. So you're going to wait until all the brilliant boys and girls who are going to become inventors in our country here will be destroyed by, and these people are now targeting the addiction in primary schools, in pre-primary schools. They lace it with what they call sweets and candies and the rest of it. And I think our country, Nigeria, is in bad shape. But we are in a more serious shape because we are actually, you can become the president of this country as long as you have money. It doesn't matter whether you are a drug lord or whatever you are. We've seen that. Something has got to be done in this country to put that to stop. And ending those lives is, in my opinion, now you can leave. But let me now weigh in on the issue of...
but with a request that perhaps you invite us both back to have a bit more time on this topic.
Yes.
I'm sure we can have a great conversation.
Indeed. Thank you so much. But could we hear from...
No, I had my first bite, which I never took, so let me go ahead and finish that.
Oh, we get a stab at...
You left me out.
I left you out because he was leaving earlier, so I just thought it fair.
Okay. Now that he has left, you bring it back. Yeah. I want to talk on the issue, two things.
On the issue of Rafah. That is
two things. On the issue of Rafah and Egypt.
Please.
Egypt is a dead, God-forsaken country with a leadership that is, devilish in the sense, because you can't allow this happening on your own border here, and you allow thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of Palestinians being massacred the way they were. They reached that separate peace agreement. They were bribed into it. They still take the bribe. Egypt is the biggest recipient of American foreign aid, and the whole idea was abandon Israel. What do you call Palestinians? They abandoned them. They abandoned them. That's why Palestinians are now doing everything they have to do. And I think the consequences are going to be that the only president who was going to do a good job on Palestine in Egypt was Morsi. Yeah. And then they killed him. They got rid of him and killed him. But that's not the end of it. Of course,
Terry said that was democracy.
And then the Americans supported that. Somebody who comes through a democratic process is dethroned.
Yes.
Through the Americans, and you bring in a general in that place to take over the country, and the general is still there. They don't want the democracy. You think the Americans are going to push for human rights and democracy in the Gulf states? No, because they're getting their way around. So that, in my opinion, I can't wait for the day all those masses are going to rise. You look at one thing. Have you ever asked yourself, million people demonstrating in Manhattan, in Washington, D.C.,
yes,
in all the major capital cities in the world, and 95% of them are not Muslims, they're not Arabs. 99% of them are humanity. Have you seen one demonstration in Saudi Arabia? One demonstration in the Gulf states?
Yeah.
One demonstration in any of these other Arab countries?
Yeah.
None of them.
Or Egypt.
Or Egypt, for that matter, which was supposed to be. So even the Organization of Arab Countries is a moribund, dead organization that has no business being there. They should just call it the Organization of Arab Americans, because they've been run by Zionists. You know what I mean?
I say not in our name. Those are Jewish Americans.
Yes. Jews, the Jews, the proper Jews who are adherents of the faith of Judaism are fighting for Palestinians. But we never see an Arab out there demonstrating for Palestinians. And then I think the earlier we have revolutions in all those countries, to bring back certain kind of humanity into those countries, the better, because it's bad. It's very, very bad for the world. Right now, they're being used to destabilize African countries. The hand of UAE is there everywhere. In Ethiopia, in Somalia, in DRC here. By the way, they're getting into it. They want to come to everywhere. They're everywhere. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, are just a branch of the Mossad and CIA in destabilizing all the other countries, Arab countries, including Yemen. Look at what they did to Yemen. Look at what they continue to do to Somalia. So basically, I mean, these people are, and by the way, no wonder some of the things that we see them in history and that they bring is as an affront to Islam, are things that were done when they were doing in collision with all those other countries. On the issue of terrorism, that you never listened to me, I mean, you didn't give me sufficient time.
Terrorism.
I wish, and insecurity in Somalia. I wish the world would listen and read the book of Smith Hempston, the ambassador who was here. Smith Hempston. Nobody can bring peace to Somalia except Somalis themselves. Let me tell you one thing. Nobody. Anybody who tries, it doesn't matter whether you're Americans. Somalia, Afghanistan are two unique countries, and to some extent Yemen, that you should never meddle with. Otherwise, that thing is going to be imported to the countries in the neighborhood. So I think the earlier with all of them get out, Americans, the UN gets out, the African Artemis gets out.
Do you remember the title of the book? For the benefit of someone who
What
wants
was
to
the book?
maybe...
You remember that
Rogue
book?
Ambassador.
The Rogue
Ambassador.
The Rogue
The
Ambassador.
Rogue Ambassador. You know what he said? If you like Beirut, you will love Mogadishu. And by then, the Americans had not suffered the Black Hawk Down.
If you like Beirut?
If you like Beirut, you will love Mogadishu. Because Beirut was the place where the 240 plus Marines were lost within just a matter of 1 hour.
They were sleeping when they were
They were sleeping when they blew them up, the Hezbollah. You know, they were basically Hezbollah. And he said, if you like it, you will love Mogadishu. These people are 10 times worse than those ones. And I'm telling you, no country should even try to go into Somalia to talk to them, bring them together, create a, what do you call, a facility for them, the way Moi did for the longest. Moi did for the longest year. And then we got the first semblance of government in Somalia through that efforts. Yeah, Abdullah, you know, and through those efforts, let's do it that way. But let's not try and go inside there. Either you do the way we're doing right now, just slipping our bankers and making money out of it and making the situation worse and compromising our own security, or you try and go and after them, they'll destroy you.
Thank you.
Tell you. So let's get out of it.
All right.
Get out of it, yeah.
Allow us just take a short break right now. We'll circle
They
back.
destroyed the TPLF, you know that. TPLF and Meles and I will lost because of going into Mogadishu. The mistake they made of going into Mogadishu, and 25,000 of them were killed, and they literally had to run for their lives. And eventually, even Ethiopia itself collapsed. You know what I mean? So I think nobody should try, and that's why Ethiopians are very, very careful in trying to go into Somalia.
All right, when we circle back, we shall look at what is happening in Senegal as well, where more than 300 books collected by the first president of independent Senegal, Léopold Sédar Senghor, will be transferred to Dakar after Senegalese government stepped in to stop them being auctioned off in France. And in total, 344 volumes will leave the house in Normandy, where Senghor spent the final 20 years of his life. And we'll give you more details of this at the end of course, on the other side of a break. And also, Rwanda is mulling over coming up with the first, of course, Rwanda Defense University. Also give you details of this on the other side of the break.